From Studio 1A in Tampa, Florida, comes a talk show that really feels your pain and tells you like it is. We love America and all that freedom-loving Americans want to protect. Live from coast to coast and on your radio, it's For the People with Keith Allen.
We'll help you survive this thing called life. We're for the people. Whatever your source of stress or strife, for the people is there.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. America. I am Keith Allen, and welcoming you to this Monday's edition of Labor Day, September the 4th, 2017. And why is it that I feel so happy to be in the studio on Labor Day? Well, because you're listening, and you don't want a pre-program. Well, I did tease it. I said maybe I would, but I didn't definitively make up my mind. And I had a business trip. I had to go into Miami to meet a client and ended up spending way too much time in Miami. I was on South Beach last night, and, you know, it's a holiday weekend, and just to try to get through South Beach was crazy. And if you've ever been to South Beach, you know what you're going to see. But you get an eyeful. And the cars that I got to see last night, some of the Lamborghinis and tricked out cars, I mean, man, it was impressive. And, of course, they drive up and down, kind of just, people check their cars out. They're checking each other out. And, it's a place to be seen, if you're in South Beach. But there's a lot of good restaurants there, bar none. I ate more to the north side of Miami Beach, but had to drive through there, heading down to Collins Avenue, where these clients need to be dropped off. But successful meeting, nevertheless. It was great. Long trip, so from Tampa to Miami and back. And I headed out about 6:20 a.m. yesterday. Got there a little early because I don't like to be rushed. And then didn't get out of there until probably 8 o'clock. And so I was just beat. I stopped at Naples. And I didn't want to get a hotel room. I just wanted to get home. There's nothing like your own bed. And what was it? An International House of Pancakes. Parked in the parking lot, away from a light. But it wasn't pitch black. But just put my seat back and went to bed for an hour. Woke up and had something to eat. Got back in the car and I was refreshed. An hour did it. So I didn't get home until 3:30 in the morning. So, but, it was worth it. It was definitely worth it. But you got to know when to pull over. I mean, my eyes were just falling asleep, and the rain was just insult to injury coming out of South Florida, Alligator Alley. And right after pretty much Alligator Alley, I think about Naples is your next biggest stop there. So that's where I stopped. I'm like, when I get out of Alligator Alley, I got to pull over. And I didn't see any alligators, no deer. They pretty much got Alligator Alley figured out. I think they got that fenced in pretty darn well now because they've had too many accidents over the years. You may remember how it used to be back in the day when you drove through there, but they've pretty much fenced that off pretty good that you don't have these things crawling across the interstate because that's caused a lot of accidents and deaths through the years. And as some officers call it, when you have a fireball and you have an explosion of a vehicle and the occupants of the car, they end up dead, you know what the troopers call them? Crispy critters. I'm not even kidding. Crispy critters. Yikes. The Caribbean is looking at a hurricane threat, possibly. Government workers there on the island of the Eastern Caribbean are cleaning drains and pruning trees as authorities are urging their residents there to prepare for Hurricane Irma, which is currently a Cat 3 likely to beginning buffeting that area starting tomorrow. The Antigua and Bermuda Weather Service said Irma was expected to bring heavy rains, rough surf, high winds. Hurricane watches were posted from Antigua and Bermuda. St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Martin, Guadalupe, and the British Virgin Islands. And the U.S. National Hurricane Center said islands farther north, including the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, should monitor the progress of the storm and be prepared for Irma possibly to head in their direction. So the long-range forecasts, everybody's looking at these spaghetti models, trying to make some sense out of it, indicating Irma would likely curve to the northwest beginning late Monday and skirt to the north of the islands in the eastern Caribbean on a path that could, they're all saying it, potentially take it to the U.S. East Coast, but it was too early to make a definitive prediction. So that's where we're at. Nothing's really changed there other than the U.S. Hurricane Center said that Irma had maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. This is this morning. Some strengthening was expected through Tuesday night. The storm was centered about 625 miles east of the Leeward Islands and moving west-southwest at 14 miles per hour. Interesting to know, Puerto Rico's Governor Richard Rossello said government agencies and U.S. territories were preparing to deal with any emergencies caused by the storm. They feel like this is going to be a threat. The Dominican Republic Public Works Minister Gonzalo Castro said workers there were cleaning roadways, and man, they take these things serious. They've taken a lashing there in the Dominican Republic. And sometimes they get a little shear kind of going through there. Sometimes they fall apart a little bit, start wobbling a little bit. But who knows? It's anybody's guess at this point, still too far out to really. European models usually a pretty good indicator, but the spaghetti models are kind of showing it's anybody's guess. Could go up the East Coast, could go to the Gulf Coast. We don't know. So we're gonna watch it here at For the People, just like you're probably paying attention to it, but we're on it here. North Korea, unbelievable, folks, but getting ready, according to experts, to launch another ballistic missile. Wasn't enough to detonate the latest detonation, which appeared to be 50 kilotons, which was a nuke test, was huge, folks. They are relentless, man. This hydrogen bomb set off a 6.5 earthquake. South Korea's defense minister said North Korea appeared to be planning a future launch to show off its claimed ability to target the United States with nuclear weapons, though it was unclear when this might happen, but there's activity at the sites as we speak. What's going on, folks? At the United Nations Emergency Council meeting, Nikki Haley painting a little history, and it's very important she clarifies why the history, but so important to know what's been happening up until right now. Folks, in my opinion, listen to Nikki Haley, what she says. War is inevitable. I just do not see any other way to stop this menace that's a danger not only to the United States and the Korean Peninsula, but the entire civilized world. Nikki Haley, folks.
North Korea has defied our collective voice. It's worth taking a few moments to recount some of the history. In 1993, the Council approved Resolution 825, calling on North Korea to remain in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That didn't work. North Korea withdrew from the treaty and continued its nuclear pursuit. In 2006, the six-party talks faltered, and North Korea conducted several ballistic missile launches. That led to Resolution 1695, condemning them. The same year, North Korea conducted its first nuclear test. That led to Resolution 1718, establishing a UN sanctions regime aiming to stop all nuclear, ballistic missile, and other weapons of mass destruction programs. After six-party talks fell apart again in 2009, North Korea conducted additional missile launches and its second nuclear test. That led to Resolution 1874, which expanded sanctions, including an arms embargo and cargo inspection obligations. In 2012, the Leap Day deal failed, and North Korea conducted two new space launches. The Security Council responded with the adoption of Resolution 2087. Following North Korea's third nuclear test in 2013, the Council adopted Resolution 2094, expanding sanctions to restrict financial, maritime, aviation, and diplomatic activities. By 2016, North Korea had conducted its fourth nuclear test and another space launch. They followed that with more missile launches. In response, the Council adopted multiple resolutions expanding sanctions even further, targeting whole sectors of North Korea's economy. Finally, this year, the Council got even more serious. First, we adopted Resolution 2356, designating high-ranking North Korean government officials and the Military Strategic Rocket Forces Command for individual sanctions. Then, just last month, after the regime's first two ICBM launches, we adopted Resolution 2371, the strongest sanctions we have ever imposed on North Korea. That resolution banned North Korean exports of coal, iron, and seafood, and imposed several other measures that will significantly cut off the revenues needed to fund their nuclear program. Why did I take the time to go through this history? To make this point. The United Nations Security Council has spoken with unusual unity and consistency on North Korea. That's a good thing. Along the way, there have been problems with implementation, and the Council has at times been too slow and too weak. But this is not a situation in which we have allowed divisions among us to stop any action. Still, here we are. Despite our efforts over the past 24 years, the North Korean nuclear program is more advanced and more dangerous than ever. They now fire missiles over Japanese airspace. They now have ICBM capabilities. They now claim to have tested a hydrogen bomb. And just this morning, there are reports that the regime is preparing for yet another ICBM launch. To the members of the Security Council, I must say, enough is enough. We have taken an incremental approach, and despite the best of intentions, it has not worked. Members of this council will no doubt urge negotiations and a return to talks. But as I've just outlined, we have engaged in numerous direct and multilateral talks with the North Korean regime, and time after time, they have not worked. The time for half measures in the Security Council is over. The time has come to exhaust all of our diplomatic means before it's too late. We must now adopt the strongest possible measures. Kim Jong-un's action cannot be seen as defensive. He wants to be acknowledged as a nuclear power. But being a nuclear power is not about using those terrible weapons to threaten others. Nuclear powers understand their responsibilities. Kim Jong-un shows no such understanding. His abusive use of missiles and his nuclear threats show that he is begging for war. War is never something the United States wants. We don't want it now. But our country's patience is not unlimited. We will defend our allies and our territory. The idea that some have suggested a so-called freeze for freeze is insulting. When a rogue regime has a nuclear weapon and an ICBM pointed at you, you do not take steps to lower your guard. No one would do that. We certainly won't. The time has come to exhaust all diplomatic means to end this crisis, and that means quickly enacting the strongest possible measures here in the UN Security Council. Only the strongest sanctions will enable us to resolve this problem through diplomacy.